Almost there, almost there. Welcome to the After Hours show. Good evening. This is the Autonomous Collective. I'm Joe in Norway, and I'm joined here by Ann Lee, a retired college professor and community member at the Daily Kos. She's a member of the National Council of Independent Scholars and is a contributor to the book, The Political Economy of Art, Making the Nation of Culture. Good evening, Ann.
Hey there.
Oh,
What's
I'd
for
like
supper?
to add that we got some things. I just wanted to add, I never mentioned that you can be found at the Daily Kos and on Medium for people interested in your work.
Yeah, if you're interested. What's for supper?
This is more of a midnight snack for me, being on the other side of the pond. We're continuing week 2 of our bean appreciation series. For some of our members who are not such big fans of the legumes, I thought I'd try to give some variations that might entice people to try some new dishes. So last week we tried an Italian version of farinata, which is a chickpea flour custard crepe omelet, sort of a vegan omelet, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
So this week we're traveling to the subcontinent, and we'll be making something called cheela, or spelled Cheela or Chila. And there's a number of variations on it. Could be for breakfast. It's a pancake / flatbread, unleavened flatbread. Well, there's a lot of variations on it. You can use chickpea flour or uridal, which is like a mung bean flour. Today, I'm going semi-native and including hearty oats. So we're gonna make flour out of the oats and mix it with the bean flour. We'll make a pancake with some spices. We've got cumin, asafoetida. We have some mung beans, which I need to ask my resident South Asian expert Harsh about. Tempering these or frying these in the beginning. What is the reason? I've been trying to figure out what this is used for. Is it digestive, help in digestion, help in fermentation of things? It's used in chutney.
Yeah, so usually you use it for tempering, like if you're not making like moong dal itself. But yeah, it's good for digestion as well. Like if you're making like lentil, just moong lentil, then it's good. But usually it's used for tempering. Like in your case, I would say it's tempering.
So my fear is every time I've tried it, it's too hard and ends up too crunchy, and I can't grind it well enough. I don't have that proper grinder that's so popular there. Just have a blender on a stick. So am I not frying these long enough to get them toasted?
Yes, maybe you can try frying it then. But this is optional though. You don't have to have it every time.
Yeah, I was going to give it a shot. So as a side dish, I was going to make, instead of the peanut chutney that you mentioned the other week making, I'll make more indigenous walnut chutney with
Nice.
the mung dal, tempered mung dal, cumin, chili,
I think if
and
that's the case,
um,
then I would say just
uh,
like keep it fried for a while.
yeah. So for the cheela, we're going to add ajuan or lovage seeds. I'll probably bring these up closer. And I always enjoy adding some onion seeds or nigella. I love the flavor from those. And of course, our friend, ever-present friend, coriander or cilantro. We'll be doing that. The other question I had, Harsh, is that I see a lot of recipes for adding carrots, spinach, or shallot and tomato. Adding tomato, does that make it easier for it to leak, the water to leak out from the tomatoes, and it kind of seem more
No,
watery if I did that?
not
You just
really.
have to chop them up very small.
Yeah, it should not be that bad actually. Yeah, the only thing is you need
Um,
to modulate how much water you're going to add into this. Should be.
yeah. Well, these ones are plum tomatoes, so they're quite, they're not as waterlogged as traditional regular tomatoes we get here. And I'll be preparing the batter for tomorrow, but I'll be cooking with, this first time I think I've done this cooking show trick. I've already prepared the batter for this evening. So we're halfway there. Well, I'll just be doing a lot of prep. We'll make the batter. We'll get the mung dal tempering with the seed and chili and whatnot for the chutney. And while I'm getting all the prep done, Anne, you want to fill us
Okay,
in on what's been happening?
let me share screen. Um, Okie dokie. Been a busy week. The usual angst about all things Russian and Ukrainian happened all week. The Russians have all kinds of inner turmoil, with one small republic having sort of complaints or civic demonstrations. A variety of today or last night, a couple of refineries were hit by drones, by Ukrainian drones. Apparently, we'll see. It's still early, and we need to get some clarification on what exactly happened. Apparently, something got hit up near Leningrad, but I mean St. Petersburg,
St. Petersburg, yeah.
and something in closer in the oblast that's right above Belgorod, and there's another refinery that got hit. It's the third largest in Russia and one of the 10 largest refineries in the world. I don't think that much got damaged. A few oil tanks got hit. I mean, it wasn't a big strike, but the Ukrainians just are just reminding the Russians that they do have a little bit of reach, and occasionally do interesting things, like last week's destruction of an AWACS, Russian AWACS planes. There were only 8 of them in existence, and the Russians only have now, I think, 3 or 4 running planes. They're very large planes, 4 engines, a lot of electronics. and two generals got shot down with the same plane. It was over the Sea of Azov, which is the along the contested area. The image I'm showing you now is where the red line is. This a red line in the center is the what Putin would really like. It's what he really wanted in all of this, to be able to seize in any kind of settlement, whether it's a ceasefire or some sort of bartered or bargain peace. That's what he really wants. And it is probably the richest areas of Ukraine, and of course controls a whole variety of resources. So that's kind of on the you can see here in this map the kind of battle area that still exists. The purple images are the ones left over from the 2014 invasion of Ukraine, and these are the ones where they've tried to convert the local populations. A lot of talk about ISW, that is the Institute for the Study of War, has estimated that it may be the case that the Russians cannot sustain a multiple region offensive. So they can only attack one, do a heavy major offensive in one place, as opposed to trying to do some other kind of fancy stuff with, feints and diversions and stuff. They simply do not have enough combat power, and it's unclear about how they're actually going to be able to get all their troops in place. For the most part, because there's been a slight lull, there's a lot more images on the internet of people getting blown up by drones dropping mortar shells on top of people sitting in trenches. And for some reason, there are a fair number of those now back on the internet if you really want to look at them. Also, they're still losing a lot of vehicles, but there's a little bit less activity along the line of contact. There's I think the international nuclear folks have managed to get some of their people into the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant finally, to see what's going on. It's just, some things just take time. Excuse me. And there are still battles going on. Every little circle here in this image is where there has been interchanges of one kind or another. Some really fascinating images. A Bradley M2 fighting vehicle. The Ukrainians have. They've transferred over 100, I think, to the Ukrainians. It has a 25 millimeter chain gun, and it's not exactly a heavy ordnance, but for some reason they managed to take out one of the top of the line T-90 Russian tanks. It's interesting to see. They were just very aggressive. Has a high rate of fire, so I think they just sort of caught the tank without paying attention, and ultimately they blew that one up. There still is turret tossing. That is some, even the T-90 can pop its turret. Turret flies in the air, and that becomes sort of an interesting piece of video to watch tank turrets fly in the air. Otherwise, it's still drone warfare. The Ukrainians don't have as much artillery ammunition as one might think. Although I would assert that they may be understating the case, because I think there's a lot of transferring of NATO and EU ordnance to the Ukrainians. There's been greater commitments than to the Russians from against the Russians to the Ukrainians in recent days. So that's been an interesting. President Zelensky went to Davos, the World Economic Forum, and of course made a plea for more help. I think people were generally more positive, and that was a good thing, I suppose. There was no. You might expect that there'd be some interaction between the Russians, although Putin didn't, I think, go to Davos this time, so there wasn't that possibility. And of course, I don't think anyone would allow that to happen relative to the events. The usual sort of naval activity occurred. There was some report that another Russian ship got hit and sunk, but that hasn't been clarified either. So that's another issue. When the big A-50 AWACS, Russian AWACS plane got knocked down, it was knocked down by a Patriot missile. So your Raytheon stock will probably be worth a little bit more now. Apparently, there was a second missile. This is another story that hasn't been quite worked out. And there was an IL-22. It's a 4-engine turboprop. It's very much like the Lockheed Electra or the E-3 anti-submarine plane, reconnaissance plane, or electronic warfare planes that that Western powers use an American design. It's a formerly the a Lockheed Electra airframe, and it's the Russian version of that with 4 turboprops, et cetera, et cetera. And this one is one of I think 20. They have a whole bunch of them, and they were meant to sort of mirror what the Americans or NATO was doing. So it got hit also by, but only damaged, and they say managed to land, pretty much taken out of action, but at least it sort of landed in friendly Russian territory. So essentially, 2 planes were taken out of action, but they brought in another A-50 to run these particular AWACS ones, and the IL-22 has a kind of jamming software or equipment that's used for electronic countermeasures, as well as sort of jamming other kinds of signals. There's been some attempts on the GPS networks in a whole variety of places, like Poland and stuff. There's been these little outages that have been happening back and forth. The Russians had a bad week in terms of energy outages with frozen pipes and power troubles, not related to the Ukrainians, but they seem to be not quite as prepared for with respect, a normal Russian winter. So that's been an interesting week. Some folks have been very deeply inconvenienced in Russia. As you can see from this image, this is kind of what the Avdiivka still looks like. And you can see that there's still a lot of moving around, and there's a lot of troops concentrated all over this place with the same general areas they've been fighting over. So you could call it a stalemate. The other way to talk about it is simply positional warfare, where you're moving against one thing and you give up a little bit, and it kind of moves back and forth. Everyone is still waiting for a major offensive that may still not occur. The current ISW report was that the ground is almost completely frozen. So within the next 2 weeks, they claim that there's going to be a Russian attack somewhere. And of course, everyone is on edge, worried about that. So that's what's happening. This is an image of the 4-engine A-50 that got knocked down. And there was tracking of the transponder tracking of the you probably can't see it here, but it shows the flight path of the planes that fly over. They don't get very near, in this case, the shore. They're simply doing the same thing that a whole bunch of NATO countries are doing with all of their intelligence, surveillance, and a reconnaissance aircraft, ISR aircraft, they spend a long time going back and forth along the borders, surveilling the kind of combat zone. And what is more interesting, as I said, a Patriot missile taking out this sort of large lumbering A-50 AWACS plane is sort of interesting. And there was nothing. They had an escort with an Su-30 fighter plane fighter bomber nearby, but it can't really do anything. It couldn't do anything for either of these planes. So that was one thing that happened. ISW also put out or commented on a report estimating what the post-war situation would look like relative to NATO. And there's been a suggestion that at some moment within the next year or two, there would be some further confrontation, as you can see here in the center, somewhere around Kaliningrad, and perhaps with Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia being kind of more at risk during this period, and perhaps an attack on Poland from the Belarus side. This is all conjecture, and it's really far ahead, but there has been some speculation and some leakage of information discussing this, as well as some other things. The German Parliament voted against transferring Taurus cruise missiles from Germany to Ukraine, but some people say that this negative vote in the legislature has very little to do with a decision that can still be made by the central government in Germany. So it may be everyone's covering their asses on this particular thing, but it is about the European defense industrial base, and that's kind of what the deal is. ISW put out a little map showing the kinds of involvement and engagement. Some countries are supplying arms to both sides, so this is also equally problematic. And of course, as we mentioned last week, is also about oil. It's always about oil, and hitting refineries was, I think a key element of sending a little message, despite the fact that it probably doesn't affect all of that oil that's still moving in terms of trade, that the Russians have not really been cut off or sanctioned. And of course, it's winter and there are needs in Western Europe for fuel oil and natural gas. So those are the kinds of things that are going on. Let me stop for a moment and see where we are in food. Something is in a pan. What's in that pan, Joe?
We've got the cheela pancake or frying up.
Nice.
And we've toasted the walnuts with curry leaves and cumin for the chutney. I've chopped up scallion, tomato, and coriander. And then flip it very soon. Once it, here we can see the flip shortly. Just give me a second. Now, Harsh, what's the difference if you add a leavening agent like baking soda or ferments over?
So I was thinking about that. I haven't tried it and I haven't seen like anybody at home use it, but I think I'm not entirely sure what it's going to do. But I have seen my mom had something called Eno, which is like baking soda kind of thing. And that's usually to make it fluffy. But I'm not sure if it's going to work in this or not, because I think it already looks pretty good.
Well, this I made last night. So it has been sitting out on the counter. I'm in Norway, so our indoors are still pretty cold here. It may have a little bit of fermentation going on. So.
Yeah. So mostly, I think it's used for fermentation, but I think yours look good anyway. It's fine.
It has a bit of a fluff to it. Yeah, looking good. Now I'll just take the toasted nuts, add some water, add the tempered garlic and chili and mung dal to it, and then we'll make a little creamy chutney. And then I'll mix the batter at the end tomorrow. Back to you, Rand.
Nice. I'm hungry again. Damn it.
Well, the question though is how much chili? These ones are a bit spicy.
You will note that we do vegan and vegetarian sort of things here. And
The only sort of things on the program.
Indeed.
Cooking
We're today's rant is a little bit more about buildings, but that are food related. Le Corbusier talked about a house is a machine for living in. Houses are kind of machines, and that was that whole machine age. Depending on your view of it, the second or third machine age analogy for what buildings have become, or what buildings in terms of technology have become. They concentrate energy, they concentrate action. That much of what we do now has a lot of computer controlled technological augments to what is just simply shelter. And then of course there are homeless people. So it is the unhoused is also an interesting element. But look, I'm going to divert our attention slightly to some problems that I think still need to be resolved, that are more about culture than they are about technology or shelter or buildings or things that are modern. They're actually quite, they're about our palates, if nothing else, but maybe so much not our palates. Well, they are about our palates. We Americans tend to still eat too much meat, animal products, and similarly in a significant part of the world, noting, of course, that there are various countries that have prohibitions, cultural prohibitions on these matters for a variety of reasons. So the idea of the machine or the house as a kind of factory or tool has been always at work here. And the standard barn-like structure is not changed that much in many years. And you can see kind of what things from the 19th and early 20th century might look like in plan when you're trying to think about pork or pigs. And it is a sort of interesting idea. What is it that we would like out of our environment? Is it the same as what pigs want? That is a good environment, adequate and regular nutrition, and safety from disease and crushing. Not that we worry about crushing a lot, but I I think that that's one thing that we don't think that much about, but we probably should. Needless to say, disease was important. You can see that the modern factory is one that sort of is spread out on a plot of land. The issue, of course, is it about the land? Is it about the footprint? Or is it really about the kind of process, the entire factory-like element here? That it is, ultimately still a linear process, that you have things like pigs, and you feed them, and you fallow them. You have births, you raise the piglets, and you have an entire cycle of processes in order to produce more pigs. Now, these are kind of fairly routinized processes and have become incredibly problematic in terms of the production of waste byproducts, which have caused incredible trouble and are not as well regulated as they should be. I mean, I think things have gotten better, but greater industry concentration has occurred, and smaller producers, farm producers, have been squeezed out of the markets as more centralization occurs for a variety of capital reasons. Now, we can sort of work against that in the whole issue of slow food and animals that are better treated, etc. But ultimately, it's probably a problem of just simply focusing on the eating of animals is just a bad deal. On the other hand, there are family resemblances. Now, you may think that this is a set of tower blocks. In this case, it's in Sunderland in the UK. In this particular case, they are actual human, apartment buildings. And that's fine. But look at this one. They look very similar. Now, this is for millions of pigs, a whole bunch of pigs. And you'll note that it's placed in a mountain environment, which is important, as people explain. These are in China, and that will become important in a moment. The idea to put them out in the mountains and away from population areas is hopefully fairly obvious. There's a whole bunch of social costs like smell and disease and pollution and all kinds of stuff that is still associated with this. Now, the claim is, of course, in a good neoliberal way, that if you designed a factory that looked more like this, perhaps more vertical, concentrated the things not so much in a long linear way in terms of taking a big flat environment, but rather sat in the hills, where you could sort of keep some of the pollution away. That's kind of would be more optimal. And considering that there is a kind of surplus in terms of the idea of doing lots of construction projects, which is a result of being more prosperous, etc., that's kind of at work in the Chinese economy. The issue, of course, and there I included a description of the difficulties of that people have objected to factory farming, that is gestation crates, poor movement for the poor animals, etc. It is problematic, but as an industry, it is about this continuous process of the pigs themselves, but all of their byproducts, which in some cases is used to develop other kinds of, in a kind of circular way, to valorize the waste products, to create, in the case of China, the argument has been made that producing byproducts of one kind or another can be used to create biofuels that can be used to make heat, to heat the buildings. So you have a more circular environment. That does not describe the full issue, though, because there's still a lot of byproducts and still a lot of hygienic methods that need to be employed. But the fact is, all of this construction was compelled by the African swine flu, which this was before COVID, and created a huge problem, wiped out an immense amount of the Chinese pig population, and caused a lot of trouble. And so as a result, these kinds of large pig factories, vertical pig factories, have been created. The expansion of China's mega farms, which came against the backdrop of the African swine flu outbreak and the trade war with the U.S., eased after Beijing issued a decree in October 2019 urging all government departments to stabilize pig production and guarantee market supplies. To that end, China set a target of 58% of the country's total pork production coming from macro farms. These are not micro farms, these are big farms, by 2022, rising to 65% by 2025. Now, the issue in China is that the Chinese diet shifted as modernization occurred from the 70s on, and so pork just is part of a diet, but really a kind of a luxury in many ways, and in the context of diets that are built mainly on other kinds of things, and vegetables and soy, etc. But it became hugely popular in the 21st century due to the population's increased purchasing power. Now, remember, this comes from prosperity, a prosperity that has been good for China, but also is problematic in terms of shifting the entire, a national diet. China is now the world's largest producer and consumer of pork, but also the largest importer, which is interesting. They've gotten interested from a class point of view in more cured meats, and actually import hams from Spain, for example. So it is a bigger issue. Ham is a luxury product, but it is interesting to see that there's been other problems in the Chinese economy, which is a regulatory issue, but making fake food has been a big issue. Even though you do have this other element of genetically modified stuff, you actually have people making stuff out of illegal products, plastic or whatever. It is just it's something that in a very, very large economy is going to be a problem. Now, the argument, of course, is that Chinese hog farms have a certain type of efficiency, and at scale, they can produce more and perhaps more healthy. The other problem, though, at the current moment is that only 35% of the total capacity China has constructed for macro farming pigs is currently in use. So there's this lag between trying to have demand, but also not being able to actually ramp up the supply to do this. Now, how is this going to happen? They're going to have to create a better consumer market. They're going to have to marginalize kind of localized small scale production of these things. It's going to be an issue. And of course, at the larger issue is the whole problem of resources that are necessary to consume meat. Climate change activists say there's little evidence that these production models can bring any sustainability benefits. So all of the issues here, it is going to be hard to manage. And yet there is giant towers of pigs, 1 million pigs that will be produced by this kind of structure that looks an awful lot like a big apartment tower block. It is part of the vertical integration of pork and pork production. And an interesting idea, because we've been looking at in our little group here about the issues of commodities. And it is fascinating that pork bellies used to be a commodity. They are no longer a primary mercantile exchange commodity. I think actually they because of the ability to have refrigerate bacon, essentially pork bellies became less of a measure for commodities, and so they stopped using that as a measure in futures exchange stuff for commodities around about a decade ago. But China just keeps rolling along, slaughtering 1.2 million pigs a year. And it is unfortunate. It is unfortunate also that China eats about half of the world's pork. And just to be fairly obvious about it, I think it's about time to have another cultural revolution and decide, well, we don't have to have. I mean, it's really tasty stuff, but I think there are other ways of approaching the economy. And the people have to switch their diets around, I think this is going to be, and it's going to be top down rather than bottom up in terms of cultural revolution. That's just me thinking about that. But in that particular structure you've just seen, it's a 26-story concrete tower. It has 30,000 feeding points, 6 giant elevators capable of carrying 240 pigs at a time. And everything is centrally managed. It has a anaerobic, a non-oxygen dependent fermentation unit that can produce 120,000 cubic meters of biogas per day. So they say, oh, this is all going to be okay for the pigs, et cetera, et cetera. You just have to rethink what this actually means. And of course, an incredible amount of money, $500 million in this particular structure, with the goal of 1.2 million pigs to be slaughtered. And so that's sort of interesting. What's worse, of course, is that there are 10 other groups interested in this degree of, industrial breeding. So that's just fascinating. That's the life of bacon. It is the whole issue of pork bellies as a commodity was sort of an interesting measure of at least in the American context, an economy based on a kind of diet. Fortunately, there's less of that focus, and really is a discussion about how all of this should change. So that's my little rant on pig production in China. I mean,
was there? Go ahead.
It was just fascinating to me to see that the biggest consumers of pork in the world, is China.
That would have been 1.2 billion, not million, right? How many? How many?
Just from that one factory is 1.2 million pigs.
Million. Oh, was there any mention of animal welfare in terms of this kind of structure being better or even worse than?
Well, they claim it's more hygienic, but you have thousands of pigs on one floor, and each floor is relatively autonomous. And all the waste products the waste products are more focused in terms of being a building rather than using, land or slurry ponds or whatever. So it is mechanically more, but it's still, as John Hayes, would reflect, this is an incredibly cruel proposition. Now, it's no different than what piggeries in the United States. It's just massive. That's all.
But these are the new genetically modified pigs that actually don't have brains, so they don't really suffer. Isn't that right?
No, there are no Republicans there. Anyway.
Well, there is the option coming up, I hope soon, taking a long time, of laboratory meat, which just requires a few samples basically from an animal to manufacture meat without any pain.
Indeed.
So what will they do if that becomes a thing?
Well, and the fact that they've subscribed some of these structures means there's that kind of issue. Do they have to try to ramp up pork production and consumption, or do they create all these other ancillary industries? It's really problematic from a planned economy point of view. But it's not a planned economy. It's a very market-driven economy. That's why it's sort of out of control.
It's not planned. It's not a plant economy either.
No, and it should be.
Other than the food they give them, which is more of the corn and and soy and stuff. I don't know about the pigs specifically. I think they get a lot of corn, which is not given to humans. It's given to animals more than anything else.
Right.
For people to eat.
Yes.
Now, this was just a trial first project, or it's going to?
No, they're in several years. They're several years on in this now.
But this is just one implementation, or there's several?
There's several in the works. There are 10 groups interested in these kinds of facilities, these massive facilities. Now, the issue is it's not simply the housing, the structures for the pigs, but it's also, all the feed production that needs the stuff that, you have to have feed come in, you have to have stuff to take the waste products out and scrub it and blah, blah, blah for, heat. And this doesn't even include, then they've got to, move all the pigs out to wherever they go regionally to be slaughtered. So it's just, I don't know if they do a lot of slaughtering on site. I think they shift it to other regional areas. And this particular site is way far inland, although the real market for pork consumption, of course, is in big cities like Shanghai. So that was my contribution to vegan discourse here. But for me, it was a big learning thing about, from a Chinese point of view, how much pork consumption one country is focused on one nation. I mean, aside from, the Philippines, it's just like there's Pork Central. So, there's plenty of other countries that consume it, and we certainly do enough in this country.
It's very popular in Malaysia.
Oh, yeah. Darn state religion. Well, anyway. So much for dietary constraints. It is fascinating to see those differences sort of work out in sort of national economies, though. And then, of course, the whole focus on, pork products, cured luxury hams being allowed or demanded in the Chinese market from transported from Spain. So there's all that. There's a weird kind of export market, but I assume they're going to develop their own, system of cured meats, much like the issues of wineries, etc. That is, kind of a bourgeois stuff that's going on in China because of the relative the prosperity of the economy.
They've been on the forefront of the meat alternatives for what, 2 millennia now? We have
Yes.
Tofu and wheat gluten is extremely popular, and cognac as well, which is derived from yam, I believe.
Yes.
It's a bit of a cognac is they use for fake fish. Fish meat substitutes.
We're none the wiser with these substitutes. I mean, relative to a diet, it's not. I mean, we're actually quite able to engineer, substitutes, and we certainly pay for it because, it's from an inflation point of view. When I go to the market, there's no cheap substitute food. I mean, in terms of meats and stuff, it's all incredibly expensive.
You're telling me, John Hayes, this is a first here. This is supposed to be keema lamb curry, but I've used a fake meat product, which
You did.
is the first time, not on screen, but we
Is it the corn with a Q from the UK?
No, this is some local one. Hold on, let me find the.
But and speaking of the price,
definitely more than I'm
of,
used to paying.
Right, the price of, I've mentioned this many times. The price of fake meats or substitutes they don't reflect the amount of subsidies that real meat and dairy gets. If you really paid what they cost, then people would see that it's not that much of a difference, probably.
Indeed.
And of course, if more people would be vegan or eat vegan food, then it would go down in price, which always happens in the wonderful market.
The market.
That market.
This is a local meat producer, Volkets, here in Norway, but they have in the same, right next to the meat, you've got these ready-made like mincemeat or burgers or cutlets and things next to meatballs and things like that, right next to the meat, so people can choose what they like, and it is getting a bigger selection. This one in particular is made from mostly rehydrated soy concentrate, coconut oil, oat fiber, pea protein, barley malt, herbs, spices, salt, onion powder, vinegar powder, and the red comes from beets. Don't think I'll be making that on.
So
air, but
does that mean they beat their meats?
No. Oh.
Nice. Wait, hold on. Can you cancel my order of pork fried rice and mushu pork? Yeah, thanks.
Yes, I'll do it for you. What's the number?
Well, Emerald Lagasse says, pork fat rules. Well, I don't know.
It rules the kingdom of hell.
I mean, it is amazing how much liquid fat is, stored in the meats we produce. Even at the leanest, there's still an incredible amount of fat.
It's true.
And we should also consider that pigs are very similar to humans in many ways, and that's why they're being experimented on for medical research.
Indeed.
So when you're eating pork, it's pretty close to eating people.
And I thought we taste like
there is a
chicken.
belief that the kosher laws come from trying to get people off cannibalism, and banning pork was a means of getting them off the flavor of human. It's too close to human.
Yum. So
there's only one good way to find that out.
Indeed.
Who wants to volunteer?
In about half an hour, speaking of a horror, Twilight Zone is coming up.
Yes, indeed.
Not Columbo.
Not Columbo.
Not Columbo.
Do you want to tease anything about it, John?
Well, tonight's episode features Jack Klugman, who's a four-time guest star on the Twilight Zone, and a very fine actor, and also Ross Martin, who appeared on an earlier episode of the Twilight Zone, Columbo, and of course, The Wild Wild West, where he was one of the stars of the show. It's a good one.
Okie dokie. I'm not sure what's coming up later in the evening. We will always.
Cameron had something. Cameron, do you want to tease what you have coming up at 11? Or maybe he doesn't. If someone could go to the schedule. Let's see.
Yeah, we'll be looking at the little short doc on the Route 66. Not a big history on it, but just a little look at it. What the American dream is and all that good stuff. So,
well, the earworm of the TV show now is floating into my head. Well, anyway, Route 66.
I don't know that one, man.
It's like, I don't know if it's Henry Mancini or whatever. It's a little theme that'll stick in your head for a long time.
All right, I'll have to check it out.
Get your kicks on Route 66.
Right. Oh, yeah, okay. But yeah, that'll be at 8 o'clock tonight, or 11 p.m. Eastern time.
11 Eastern, yeah.
Yes.
So I've made cheela or oat chickpea flour pancakes with scallion, chili, and tomato.
Oh man!
With onion seeds and ajwan is lovage. I believe in English it's called lovage seeds. And we've made a walnut chutney to go along with it. Spicy. And it was spicy. And we made the batter. So it's a mixture of oats that I've ground into a flour, mixed with the chickpea flour, added 1 cup. So it was basically a ratio of 1 to 1 to 1. So I do it a day or not a few hours before because you want the beans to absorb the water, rehydrate, and it also prevents you getting an upset stomach from undercooked beans, which is also a potential danger. So be careful there. Soak it, leave it overnight. It's not going to hurt. Just if you bring it out of the refrigerator, let it sit at room temperature for a bit. And you might need to add water after it's been sitting around for a while. So you just fry them up like flapjacks, South Indian flapjacks, basically. Not sure what we'll do next week. I think beans might still be on the menu. We'll have to see.
Beans.
Although we'll be in Spain. So we're going to be broadcasting from Spain, maybe on a mountainside if we've got reception.
Nice.
Campfire food.
Exciting. Well, I guess we're getting close to the end here. We will thank you for your attention, and we'll be back next week with more stuff. Stuff after hours.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Bye. Bye.